Will you be my wife,
Will
Miss
you be
Pretty?
my wife?
The words came from somewhere behind the
Will you
crate
be
of
my
vintage
wife?
wine, small and hopeful and completely absurd given that Yolanda Jones was currently crouched in the pantry of the Gilded Grill at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, counting the cash she'd hidden from the legal vultures circling her life. $340. Tips from 2 months of Smile and Serve, tucked into an envelope she kept taped behind the industrial shelving. Not enough to pay the lawyer who'd promised to clear her name. Not even close to enough to make Marcus stop hunting her. Outside the pantry door, she could hear him. Not Marcus himself, he was too important to do his own dirty work, but the thug he'd sent. The voice was muffled but unmistakable, oily smooth in the way of men who enjoyed other people's fear. I know she works here. Dark skin, pretty. Goes by Yolanda. Where is she? Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Gilded Grill, turning Chicago into a watercolor of neon and shadow. The scent of expensive bourbon mixed with petrichor, creating an atmosphere thick enough to taste. Yolanda pressed her spine against the cold metal shelving and tried to calculate how long she could hide before someone gave her up. Then she heard the rustle. Small movements behind the wine crates, the whisper of fabric against cardboard. She turned her head slowly and found herself staring at a child. He couldn't have been more than 6, maybe 7. A red hoodie swallowed his small frame, making him look like a misplaced spark of color in a world designed in shades of shadow and smoke. His dark eyes were too old for his face, holding something ancient that didn't belong in someone so young. You're hiding too, he whispered. And it wasn't a question. Yolanda's finger went to her lips. Shh, the universal language of people who knew what it meant to need invisibility. The boy smiled, a small, knowing curve that made her chest ache. He crawled closer, navigating the pantry with the confidence of someone who'd spent time in spaces he wasn't supposed to be. My daddy says sharks can smell fear, he said quietly. But if you don't act like prey, they get confused. Despite everything, despite Marcus's thug 20 feet away, despite 2 years of running, despite the suffocating weight of a life that kept collapsing, no matter how many times she tried to rebuild it, Yolanda felt her lips curve into something close to a real smile. Your daddy sounds smart. He owns the sky, the boy said with absolute certainty. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out something that caught the dim pantry light. A plastic ring. Bright red carnation on top, the kind that came from quarter machines outside grocery stores. He held it out like it was forged from starlight and promises. Will you be my wife, Miss Pretty? The laugh that escaped her throat was pure gold, rich and warm and entirely unexpected. It came from somewhere she'd thought Marcus had destroyed, the part of her that could still find absurdity beautiful. Baby, if I say yes, will you keep the sharks away? The boy's eyes lit up with such fierce joy that Yolanda felt something crack open in her chest. Yes. My daddy owns the sky, and sharks can't swim that high. You'll be safe, I promise. She should have said no. Should have explained that plastic rings from children didn't stop men like Marcus. Should have recognized this for what it was, a lonely kid playing make-believe, while his father did whatever rich men did in restaurants like this. Instead, Yolanda Jones took the plastic ring and slipped it onto her finger. It didn't fit. Too small by at least 2 sizes. But she wore it anyway. This ridiculous symbol from a child who'd offered her salvation without knowing she'd been drowning. Okay, she whispered. I'll marry you. What's your name? Minho. It means brightness and goodness. Daddy picked it after Mommy died because he said I was the only light left. The words hit her like a fist. This wasn't just a lonely rich kid. This was a child who understood loss, who knew what it meant to hide in pantries and make bargains with strangers because the world outside was full of sharks. Welcome to Ruthless Romance Tales. And honey, you just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you're here for the love stories that hit different, the ones where 6-year-olds play matchmaker and broken people find each other in the dark, then you're exactly where you need to be. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and settle in, because this story is about to take you from Chicago to Seoul and everywhere in between. The pantry door opened. Not kicked open. Not slammed. Just opened with the kind of control that suggested the person on the other side had known exactly where they were the entire time. Yolanda's body went rigid. Minho looked up, and his face transformed half guilt, half pure adoration. Daddy, and then she saw him, Kim Woo-jun. He stood framed in the doorway like something carved from obsidian in winter, backlit by the golden glow of the restaurant beyond, tall enough that the space seemed to shrink around him. He wore black-on-black suit, shirt, tie, the kind of tailored perfection that didn't need labels because anyone with eyes could see it cost more than most people's monthly rent. His face was all sharp angles and controlled violence, with eyes like cold flint that missed nothing and forgave less. but it was the way he looked at his son that made Yolanda's breath catch. Not with anger, not even with disappointment, with a love so fierce and protective it made the air between them vibrate with barely contained emotion. "Min-ho," he said quietly, and his voice was exactly what Yolanda expected, low, controlled, the kind of sound that didn't need volume to command attention. "You were supposed to wait in the car." "But cars are boring," and she was hiding, and I thought. Min-ho stopped, looking between his father and Yolanda with sudden worry. "I found you a wife, like you said I needed to. Someone who isn't afraid of sharks." Woo Jun's eyes finally left his son and landed on Yolanda. The impact was visceral, physical, like being assessed by something predatory and finding yourself interesting enough to keep alive. He took in everything in seconds: her server's uniform, the envelope of cash she was still clutching, the plastic ring on her finger, the particular way she'd positioned herself between his son and the door even though she didn't know him. His gaze lingered on her face, her dark skin in this city of pale faces, her Atlanta bone structure softened by Louisiana roots, the exhaustion she wore like a second uniform, the fear she was trying to hide, the strength underneath that fear that refused to break even after 2 years of running. He saw her, really saw her, and that was more terrifying than anything Marcus had ever done. "Yolanda Jones," he said, and it wasn't a question. He already knew. "Former owner of Magnolia Catering in Atlanta. Framed for fraud by your business partner Marcus Chen. Wanted in 3 states. Currently working illegally under a false name while Marcus's people hunt you across state lines." Her blood turned to ice. "Because this is my restaurant, and I make it my business to know who's running through my doors." He moved closer, and Yolanda caught the scent of sandalwood and something darker, gunpowder maybe, or just controlled violence worn like cologne. "The man looking for you is currently being convinced by my security that you're not here. He'll leave in approximately 4 minutes. Then you and I need to have a conversation. I don't know what you think. I think my 6-year-old son just proposed to you with a 25-cent ring, and you said yes." The corner of his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile but held the shape of dark amusement. "I think you're desperate enough to hide in my pantry, but brave enough to not cry when cornered. I think you're exactly the kind of desperate that makes people do interesting things. Interesting or stupid, often the same thing." He extended his hand, long fingers, scarred knuckles, the kind of hand that had built empires and buried bodies. "I'm Kim Woo Jun, and you and I are going to help each other, whether you know it yet or not." Yolanda stared at his hand, at Min-ho watching them both with hope blazing in his 2 old eyes, at the plastic ring on her finger catching the light like a promise or a threat. She'd spent 2 years running, 2 years hiding, 2 years letting Marcus dictate every move she made. Maybe it was time to try something different. She placed her hand in Woo Jun's. His grip was exactly what she expected: firm, cool, absolute. The handshake of someone who'd never lost a negotiation because he made sure the terms were set before the game began. 4 minutes, he said quietly. "That's how long until Marcus's man realizes you're not hiding in the bathroom. I suggest we use the front door. They're always watching the exits. They never expect prey to walk straight past them. That's insane. That's survival." His hand tightened on hers just slightly. "Welcome to my world, Yolanda Jones. Let's see if you're brave enough to stop running and start fighting back." And somehow, impossibly, dangerously, inevitably, she found herself nodding. Min-ho grabbed her other hand, his small fingers wrapping around hers with absolute trust. "I told you," he said proudly. "Daddy owns the sky. You're safe now." Looking at Kim Woo Jun's cold, controlled face and the particular hunger in his eyes as he assessed her, Yolanda wasn't sure safe was the right word, but for the first time in 2 years, she didn't want to run. The tension in the back of Woo Jun's car was thick enough to taste a physical weight pressing down on Yolanda's chest, making every breath feel calculated. The vehicle itself was pure luxury wrapped in Fortress. Bulletproof glass so thick it distorted the Chicago lights streaming past, leather seats that smelled like old money and new violence, and the particular silence that came with armor plating designed to stop more than just bullets. Min-ho had fallen asleep within minutes, his head pillowed on Yolanda's shoulder like he'd known her his entire life instead of 20 minutes. She found her hand moving instinctively to smooth his hair. This child who'd offered her a plastic ring and called it salvation. Woo Jun watched her in the rearview mirror. She felt his gaze like a physical touch, assessing, calculating, measuring her worth in ways that had nothing to do with money. "He doesn't trust easily," Woo Jun finally said, his voice low enough not to wake his son. "After his mother died, he stopped letting anyone close. The therapists called it attachment disorder. Self-protection. What do you call it? Smart." The word was bitter. "People leave. People die. Why attach to something that'll be ripped away?" Yolanda looked down at Minho's sleeping face. He attached to me pretty fast. Yes, he did. Woo Jun's eyes found hers in the mirror again. And this time something else flickered beneath the cold assessment. Which means either my son has finally healed enough to take risks again, or you're dangerous in ways I haven't identified yet. I'm a waitress running from fraud charges. How dangerous could I be? You built a 6-figure catering company from nothing in 18 months. You survived Marcus Chen's betrayal without breaking. You've evaded his hunters for 2 years across 4 states. His voice dropped, taking on the texture of controlled violence. You're not dangerous like a gun, Yolanda Jones. You're dangerous like a mirror you make men look at themselves and realize they're not as invincible as they thought. The words settled in her chest, heavy and strange. No one had ever called her dangerous before. Desperate, yes. Stubborn, frequently. But dangerous? What do you want from me? What makes you think I want something? Men like you don't save people for free. There's always a price. She'd learned that the hard way with Marcus, with every man who'd promised help and delivered conditions. Woo Jun's almost smile returned. Smart and cynical. Good. That'll help you survive what comes next. The car pulled up to a building that looked like it had been carved from glass and moonlight, all clean lines and cold elegance. The kind of architecture that said fortress in 5 languages. We're going to my home. You'll shower, eat, sleep. Tomorrow, we negotiate terms. Terms for what? For the deal my son just made on my behalf. He stepped out of the car, moving with the particular grace of someone trained in violence. He lifted Minho with practiced ease, the boy barely stirring. He asked you to be his wife. I'm asking you to be my fiancé. Fake engagement, real protection. 1 year in Seoul. I crush Marcus. You give my son a mother figure and me a shield against my father's coup. The words hit her like buckshot scattered, sharp, too many to process at once. Seoul? Your father? What? Tomorrow, he repeated, already walking toward the building entrance. Tonight you rest. Because once we start this, Yolanda, there's no going back. You'll be stepping into a war that makes Marcus look like amateur hour. She should run. Should thank him for the help and disappear into the Chicago night before this got any more complicated. Instead, she followed him inside. The elevator required biometric scanning his palm, his retina, a code he entered too quickly for her to catch. They rode up in silence, the city dropping away beneath them, until they were suspended in glass and steel and the particular quiet that came with being too high for normal sounds to reach. His apartment was exactly what she expected, museum-quality emptiness, all clean lines and expensive restraint. Nothing soft, nothing warm, everything built to withstand. A fortress disguised as a home. Mrs. Han appeared within seconds, an older Korean woman with kind eyes and the kind of competence that came from managing chaos so long it looked like calm. She took one look at Minho and nodded, understanding without words that she needed to take the boy to bed. Alone with Woo Jun, the space felt simultaneously too large and suffocatingly intimate. He poured 2 glasses of something amber whiskey, probably, or maybe bourbon, American liquor in a Korean man's home. Everything about him was contrasts and controlled violence. He handed her a glass. The guest suite is through there. Everything you need should be stocked. Mrs. Han keeps it prepared. For what? Women you recruit for fake engagements? For people who need sanctuary. The way he said it made sanctuary sound like another word for cage. You're not the first person to need somewhere safe. You won't be the last. Yolanda took the whiskey, let it burn down her throat. Liquid courage or liquid stupidity, hard to tell which. Why me? You could hire anyone, pay them, control them completely. Because Minho chose you. And my son hasn't chosen anything for himself since the day he found his mother's body. The words were brutal in their honesty. She died at home. Brain aneurysm. One moment she was laughing at something he'd drawn. The next she was gone. He was 4 years old. He ran to get help, but I was in a meeting 300 miles away. And by the time I got home, he stopped. Drank. The muscle in his jaw worked like he was chewing glass. I'm sorry, Yolanda said, and meant it. Don't be. Just understand what I'm offering. My son needs someone who looks at him like he's a child instead of a tragedy. Someone who doesn't know his story before meeting him. Someone who can teach him that not everyone leaves. He set down his glass with controlled precision. And I need someone the board can't dismiss. Someone unexpected. Someone who proves I'm stable enough to run a global empire while raising a traumatized child. And Marcus? Marcus is a bonus. While you're under my protection, I'll have my people build a case that will destroy him so thoroughly his own mother will testify against him. His eyes were obsidian chips, reflecting nothing. I have resources Marcus can't imagine, connections he can't buy, And I'm very, very good at dismantling men who think they're untouchable. It should have scared her. The cold calculation, the way he spoke about destroying another human being like it was just another business transaction. Instead, it made her want to lean in, want to say yes, want to finally, have someone on her side who didn't see her as a victim to be pitied, but as a piece in a game worth winning. What's the catch, Soul? He moved closer, and Yolanda caught the scent of sandalwood again, mixed with something else, cordite, maybe, or just danger-wearing expensive packaging. My father is there. He's the chairman of the Kim Group, and he wants me removed. Claims I'm unstable, unfit, too distracted by grief and single parenthood to lead effectively. There's a board vote in 3 weeks. If I show up married or engaged with clear intent, he can't use my personal life as a weapon. And you think I can convince a boardroom full of Korean executives that I'm legitimate? I think you convinced my son in under 5 minutes that you were worth trusting. I think you built a business from nothing. I think you've survived 2 years of hell without breaking. His hand lifted, and for a moment Yolanda thought he might touch her face. He didn't. Instead, he handed her a gold-plated fountain pen, heavy, expensive, the kind of object that cost more than her car used to. I think you're exactly stubborn enough to tell my father to go fuck himself once you learn enough Korean to do it properly. Despite everything, she laughed. You want to teach me Korean? I have 3 months before the board meeting. Mrs. Han is fluent in both languages. You'll have private tutors starting tomorrow. He pulled out a folder, set it on the table between them. This is the contract. 1 year. Full protection, legal, financial, physical. Access to my resources to destroy Marcus. At the end of the year, we part ways. Your name cleared, both of us free. And Minho learns that sometimes good things don't have to be permanent to be real. That a year of having a mother is better than a lifetime of being too afraid to let anyone close. Yolanda opened the folder. Read the terms. It was thorough compensation, housing, security, exit clauses that gave her outs if things became dangerous, fair in ways that made her suspicious because fair wasn't something she'd encountered in years. Why do you really want this? She asked. The truth. Not the corporate strategy or the Protective Father Act. Why me? Woo Jun was quiet for a long moment. Then, because when I walked into that pantry and saw you crouched with my son, you didn't try to use him to get to me. You protected him. Moved between him and the door without thinking. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, Minho had found what I've been looking for. Someone who sees him first and the fortune second. The honesty in his voice was more terrifying than any threat could have been. Soul, Yolanda said. When do we leave? 3 days. Mrs. Han will help you prepare, pack, learn basic Korean phrases for the airport. His hand finally did what she'd been both dreading and hoping for. It settled against her cheek. Warm and rough and absolutely controlled. Welcome to the war, Yolanda Jones. Try not to die before we win. She should pull away, should maintain distance, should remember this was business, not salvation. Instead, she leaned into the touch and whispered, Same to you. His almost smile became something more real, more dangerous. Oh, I never die, Yolanda. I just make other people wish they had. 3 months. That's how long Yolanda had between Chicago and Seoul. Long enough to learn conversational Korean, not fluent, but functional. Long enough for Minho to start calling her almost mommy, with the particular hope of children who'd learned not to trust permanence. Long enough for Woo Jun to teach her the basics of Korean business culture, while his lawyers built the case that would bury Marcus. And just barely long enough for her to forget what it felt like to be hunted. Seoul hit like a tectonic shift, pressure and heat and the particular violence of worlds colliding. Yolanda stepped off the plane at Incheon International, into a wall of humidity that made Chicago's lake effect feel like a gentle suggestion. The air tasted like salt and exhaust and the ghost of ancient dynasties that haunted the spaces between glass towers. The camera flashes started before they cleared customs. Mr. Kim, is it true you've brought home an American wife? Who is she? What's her background? Does Chairman Kim approve of this relationship? The questions came in Korean and English, a river of language designed to catch whatever fish might bite. Yolanda felt Minho's hand tighten in hers as he pressed closer, seeking shelter from the attention. She pulled him against her side, her body a shield she hadn't consciously decided to become. Woo Jun's hand settled at the small of her back, warm through the silk of her blouse, possessive in a way that made every camera lens focus like predators scenting blood. My fiancé values privacy, he said in Korean, then switched to English. We won't be answering questions at this time. His Korean was different from his English, sharper, more formal, carrying the weight of someone born to command. Yolanda recognized the tone even if she couldn't follow every word. This wasn't a request for cooperation. It was a warning wrapped in civility. They moved through the airport like a ship cutting water, security forming a perimeter that parted crowds and discouraged pursuit. Outside, a Maybach waited, bulletproof glass, armored panels, the kind of vehicle that said Fortress in every language. Minho fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by travel and attention. Yolanda found herself watching Seoul stream past through tinted windows, neon signs, advertising products she was just learning to read, street food vendors beside luxury boutiques, ancient temples shadowed by construction cranes building tomorrow on top of yesterday. Culture shock? Woo Jun asked quietly. Culture collision, she corrected. Everything here is contrasts. Old and new, tradition and rebellion, respect and rage. That's Korea. That's also my family. His jaw tightened. My father built his empire on those contrasts. Respect the traditions while breaking every rule. Demand loyalty while showing none. It's made him very wealthy and absolutely miserable. And you? Are you miserable? He turned to look at her fully, and Yolanda saw something flicker in those obsidian eyes, something wounded and ancient and too honest for comfort. I was. For a long time after Mi-sun died, I was so miserable I forgot what any other feeling tasted like. Then Minho stopped talking, and I realized I didn't get to be miserable. I had to be enough for both of us. That's not healthy. No, but it's effective. His hand found hers, not the performative touch for cameras, but something quieter, more real. Until 3 months ago when my son proposed to a stranger in a pantry, and reminded me that maybe there were other ways to survive besides just enduring. Before Yolanda could respond, the car swerved. Hard, fast, professional, evasive maneuvers that threw her against Woo Jun's side. Sir, the driver said tersely in Korean. 2 cars, following since the airport. Woo Jun's expression didn't change, but his body went rigid. Not with fear, with readiness. How close? He asked in Korean. Gaining. Yolanda's 3 months of Korean was just enough to follow the exchange. Someone was tailing them. Intentionally. Professionally. Woo Jun pressed a button on his phone. Spoke rapid Korean she couldn't quite catch. Then he turned to Yolanda, switching to English. This is your last chance to run. Say the word, and I'll have you on the next flight back to Chicago. No questions, no debt. She looked at Minho sleeping against her shoulder. At the SUVs in the side mirror, dark and threatening and probably sent by the same father who thought he could take this man's company and his son. I didn't come all this way to run from cars. She met his eyes. Who sent them? My father, testing boundaries, letting us know he's watching. Woo Jun's hand tightened on hers. Welcome message with teeth. The SUVs pulled alongside them, one on each side. Tinted windows, no plates Yolanda could see. Just presence and menace and the clear message that they could end this if they wanted to. Then, just as suddenly, they peeled off, disappearing into Seoul traffic like sharks diving deep before the real attack. My father's welcome party, Woo Jun said quietly. Minho stirred, woke, rubbed his eyes. Are we home, Daddy? He asked in Korean. Almost, Minho, almost. The Kim estate revealed itself slowly, traditional Hanok architecture wrapped around modern security. Wooden beams and curved tile roofs nestled behind walls that probably had more cameras than a television studio. Gates opened soundlessly, admitting them to a courtyard where ancient stone met perfectly manicured garden. Waiting at the entrance was a woman who made ice look warm by comparison. She stood with the posture of someone born to judgment, wearing a traditional hanbok in deep charcoal that probably cost more than Yolanda's entire Atlanta wardrobe had. Her hair was swept back with the severity of someone who'd learned to weaponize presentation. Her eyes were the same shade as Woo Jun's obsidian chips that cut whatever they touched. Mother, Woo Jun said in Korean, then switched to English. This is Yolanda Jones, my fiancée. Madam Kim's expression didn't flicker. Not surprise, not displeasure. Just that terrible, controlled assessment that stripped away pretense and found the price of everything. I am Madam Kim, she said in Korean, then switched to English so precise it could perform surgery. You may address me as Mother Kim when appropriate. Welcome to Seoul. I trust your journey was comfortable? It was phrased as courtesy, but tasted like threat. Yes, thank you, Yolanda said in careful Korean, then continued in English. It's an honor to meet you, is it? Madam Kim's eyes traveled from Yolanda's face down to the child holding her hand, then back up with the thoroughness of someone cataloging flaws. We shall see. She said the next part in English, making sure Yolanda understood every word. The chairman wishes to meet you, tonight. Dinner will be served at 7. I trust you have something appropriate to wear? I'm sure I can find something. Mrs. Han will assist you. We have standards in this family, and appearances matter. She turned to Woo Jun, switching back to Korean. Your father is very interested in meeting the woman who has captured your attention so completely. I suggest you prepare your fiancé for what that means." She swept past them, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and barely veiled threat in her wake. "That was your mother?" Yolanda asked in halting Korean. Woo Jun's almost smile flickered. That was her polite mode. "Wait until dinner. Then you'll see what actual hostility looks like." "I can't wait," Yolanda muttered, and felt his quiet laugh against her spine, a vibration of dark amusement that said she had no idea what she'd just walked into. She was starting to suspect he was right. The dining room was a study in controlled violence disguised as tradition. Silk screens depicting cranes and mountains divided the space into intimate alcoves, each lit by paper lanterns that cast shadows like secrets across lacquered wood. The scent of aged tea hung in the air, bitter and complex, mixing with incense that smelled like cedar and smoke and centuries of judgment. Yolanda sat at a low table that probably cost more than her Atlanta house had, her legs folded beneath her in the Caesar position Mrs. Han had taught her that afternoon. Her thighs were already screaming, her back ached from holding perfect posture, but she'd learned long ago that showing weakness was the fastest way to get eaten alive. Chairman Kim sat at the head of the table, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing traditional hanbok in charcoal gray that made him look like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. Madam Kim was to his right, perfect and cold as a blade fresh from the forge. Woo Jun was to his left, Minho beside him, and Yolanda sat across from them all like a specimen being examined for flaws. The first course arrived on porcelain, so delicate Yolanda could see shadows through it. Soup. Something pale and gelatinous that smelled like the ocean had died and been fermented. "This is honjaho," Chairman Kim said in Korean, then switched to English, his accent barely there. "A delicacy. Fermented skate, quite pungent. I hope your American palate can handle it." Yolanda recognized the test immediately. Accept the insult, and she was weak. Refuse the food, and she was rude. It was a trap dressed as hospitality. She lifted the bowl, breathed in the ammonia-sharp scent that made her eyes water, and took a deliberate sip. It tasted like death in the ocean, and something that had no business being called food. She swallowed, smiled. "Interesting," she said in Korean, then continued in English. "Reminds me of chitlins back home. Same principle, take something nobody wants and make it a point of pride." Chairman Kim's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "You're familiar with fermentation techniques?" "I ran a catering company, built it from nothing. Fermentation, preservation, extraction. You can't run a kitchen without understanding chemistry." She set down the bowl, though I admit we usually fermented things people actually wanted to eat. Madam Kim's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "How?" "Rustic," she said in Korean. "Practical," Yolanda corrected in Korean, then switched to English. "But I appreciate the cultural education. Tell me, Chairman Kim, is testing guests with food a traditional Korean practice? Or something you invented specifically for me?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Woo Jun laughed a low, dark sound that made everyone at the table turn to look at him. "She has you there, father," he said in Korean, then continued in English. "The hanjaho trick only works if your target doesn't know they're being tested." "I wasn't," Chairman Kim started. "You were," Woo Jun said in Korean. "You serve hanjaho to intimidate, to watch people struggle between politeness and survival. Same reason Mother seated Yolanda across from us instead of beside me, positioning psychology. Make her feel outnumbered." Madam Kim's expression finally cracked. "That's disrespectful," she said in Korean. "It's honest. Which is more than I can say for this dinner." He continued in English for Yolanda's benefit. "What's the real test, father? The food? The seating? Or are we waiting for the main course, where you'll really try to break her?" Chairman Kim's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Your American is more observant than expected," he said in Korean, then clapped his hands twice. The staff cleared the table with military efficiency. Within minutes, new dishes appeared. But these weren't the elegant, carefully plated courses Yolanda had expected. These were kitchen scraps, fish heads still attached to spines, vegetable ends too woody to eat, cuts of meat so gristled they looked inedible. "These," Chairman Kim said in Korean, gesturing to the spread, then switching to English, "are the ingredients our staff would normally discard. I thought perhaps your rustic American background might find creative uses for them." His smile was venomous. "After all, you claimed expertise in making something from nothing. Prove it." Yolanda felt rage bloom in her chest, hot and clarifying. This wasn't about food. This was about breaking her, proving she didn't belong, giving Woo Jun an excuse to send her back to Chicago. She looked at the scraps, At Chairman Kim's expectant cruelty, at Madam Kim's cold satisfaction, at Min-ho's worried face. Then she stood. "Where's your kitchen?" she asked in Korean. Chairman Kim blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your kitchen. Unless you expect me to cook on this table?" She started gathering the scraps, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who'd spent years turning nothing into everything. "You want to see what I can do with garbage? Fine, but I'm going to need fire." "Yolanda," Woo Jun said quietly in English. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," she said firmly in Korean, then met his eyes. "Your father wants a show? Let's give him one." The kitchen was everything she'd dreamed of when she'd run Magnolia Catering commercial-grade equipment, knives sharp enough to shave with, spices from every corner of Asia organized like a military operation. 3 chefs looked up in shock when she entered, Chairman Kim and the family trailing behind like an audience coming to watch an execution. Yolanda assessed her materials with a chef's eye: fish heads, collagen, and flavor locked in bones. Vegetable scraps foundation for stock. Gristled meat low and slow would break down connective tissue into silk. She moved. Her hands remembered the rhythm of her Atlanta kitchen, the muscle memory of building empires from scraps. She commandeered the largest pot, filled it with water, added the fish heads and bones. Flames leaped to meet her command. While that built its foundation, she grabbed the vegetable scraps, started breaking them down with knife work, so precise the head chef moved closer to watch. Ginger, she found it growing in a pot by the window, harvested what she needed. Gochugaru Korean red pepper flakes, bright and violent. Doenjang fermented soybean paste that tasted like earth and thyme. She was building something that didn't exist on any menu, a fusion of Louisiana soul and Korean Han, the particular grief that fermented into art. The gristled meat went into a different pot with soy sauce. Brown sugar she caramelized first. Garlic she crushed with the flat of her blade. Low heat, time, patience, the things that turned garbage into gold. She worked in silence, the kitchen filling with smells that made even Chairman Kim's expression shift from contempt to curiosity. Steam rose like prayers. Fat rendered down. Bones gave up their secrets. 40 minutes later, she plated. The dish was beautiful in its simplicity, short ribs so tender they fell apart under breath, sitting in a reduction so glossy it looked like liquid silk. Beside it, a broth made from fish heads and vegetable scraps that smelled like the ocean had learned to sing, garnished with fresh herbs she'd found neglected in the garden. Fried garlic for crunch, a soft-boiled egg because luxury wasn't about money, it was about attention to detail. She carried the plate to Chairman Kim herself, set it before him like a challenge. "You gave me garbage," she said quietly in Korean. "I gave you art." She switched to English. "That's not rustic. That's alchemy. That's taking everything you thought was worthless and proving you didn't know what you were looking at." The room held its breath. Chairman Kim picked up his chopsticks, took one bite of the short rib, then another. His expression didn't change, but Yolanda saw the moment he understood this wasn't just food. This was a declaration of war wrapped in perfect technique. "It's exceptional," he finally said in Korean, then continued in English. The admission looked like it cost him. "Though I'm curious you speak of alchemy, of transformation. Tell me, Miss Jones, do you think the same principle applies to people, that someone discarded can become valuable? I think people who discard other people usually reveal more about their own poverty than anyone else's worth." She met his eyes without flinching. "And I think your son deserves someone who fights for him instead of testing whether he's worth fighting for." The silence stretched so long Yolanda thought she'd miscalculated, gone too far, proven she didn't belong. Then Min-ho spoke, his small voice cutting through the tension. "I told you, Daddy. I told you she was brave," he said in Korean. Woo Jun's hand found hers under the table, a brief squeeze that felt like an entire conversation compressed into pressure. When she looked at him, his expression was carved from something between pride and possession, dangerous and devastating in equal measure. "Yes, you did." Chairman Kim set down his chopsticks. "We shall see if bravery is enough. The board meeting is in 3 weeks, Miss Jones. I suggest you use that time to learn your place in this family, because talent in a kitchen won't save you when the real tests begin." "Good thing I've been tested my whole life then," Yolanda said. "Your move, Chairman." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Indeed, my move." The penthouse Woo Jun kept in downtown Seoul was different from the family estate, harder, colder, built for someone who didn't want reminders of tradition while waging modern war. Glass and steel, and the particular emptiness that came with spaces designed for function over comfort. Rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the city below into an impressionist painting of neon bleeding into darkness. Yolanda had been there 5 days when she found the blood. It was 2 a.m. She'd woken from nightmares about Marcus, about Atlanta burning, about Chairman Kim's smile as he served her garbage. She'd gone looking for water and found Woo Jun instead, standing at the window with his shirt off and a fresh bandage seeping red against his ribs. What happened? The words came out sharper than intended in Korean. He turned, and in the city light, reflecting off rain-slicked glass, she saw the damage properly. Not just the wound a graze, probably, clean edges that suggested a blade rather than a bullet, but the map of scars across his torso. Old violence written on skin that had learned to heal wrong. Corporate dispute, he said in Korean. Like that explained anything. Corporate doesn't usually end with bleeding. It does in my world. He moved to pour himself whiskey, the motion revealing more damaged bruises flowering across his ribs, the particular way he held himself that spoke of pain being managed rather than acknowledged. My father sent a message. I sent one back. This is the punctuation. Yolanda crossed to him before her brain caught up to her body. You need that cleaned properly. And rebandaged. You're going to get infected, she said in Korean. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your shirt, which means you're not fine. Sit down. She didn't wait for him to comply, just pushed him toward the leather couch that probably cost more than her car used to. Do you have a first aid kit? Or do corporate warriors just bleed on expensive furniture? His almost smile flickered. Bathroom, under the sink. She found it military-grade medical supplies, the kind that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd needed to patch himself up at 2 a.m. She brought it back to find him sitting exactly where she'd left him, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. This is going to hurt, she warned in Korean. Everything hurts. I'm used to it. She knelt between his legs. The position was more intimate than she'd intended, but medical necessity overrode propriety. She peeled away the old bandage, hissing at what she found underneath. The wound was clean, but deep. Whoever had sent the message knew exactly how much damage to do without causing permanent harm. Your father did this? She asked quietly in Korean. My father ordered it. He doesn't get his hands dirty anymore. Woo. Jun's voice was desert dry. He sent his second-in-command Park Sang-woo, old-school enforcer. Knows how to cut deep enough to teach lessons without creating evidence. Yolanda cleaned the wound with antiseptic, feeling him tense but not pull away. His skin was warm under her hands, marked with the particular history of someone who'd survived violence so many times it became normal. What was the lesson? That bringing you here was a mistake. That American women don't belong in Korean boardrooms. That I'm letting sentiment cloud judgment. His hand found her wrist, holding her still. That if I don't remove you voluntarily, he'll do it for me. Fear spiked through her, cold and sharp. He threatened me? He promised to destroy you. Different thing. His grip tightened. But I want you to understand what that means. My father doesn't make idle threats. If he says he'll destroy you, he means it. He'll find every secret, every shame, every moment of weakness you've ever had and weaponize it. He'll make Marcus look like an amateur. Then why am I still here? She resumed cleaning the wound, her hands steadier than her heart. If I'm such a liability, because Minho trusts you, because you made art from garbage and told my father to go fuck himself with perfect politeness, because... He stopped, because I'm tired of letting him win. The honesty in his voice was brutal. Yolanda started bandaging, her fingers brushing against scars she wanted to ask about but didn't. There was a history written on his skin that she wasn't entitled to read. Not yet. Maybe never. Tell me about Minho's mother, she said quietly in Korean. She felt him go rigid under her hands. Why? Because your son mentioned her. Because I need to understand what I'm walking into. Because if I'm going to pretend to be his mother for a year, I should know who I'm following. She secured the bandage, but didn't move away. Unless talking about her is too. Her name was Mi-sun, Park Mi-sun. His voice went distant, switching to English. We met at university. She was studying art history. I was being groomed to take over the family empire. She was everything. I wasn't soft, creative, optimistic in ways I'd forgotten existed. My father hated her. Said she was too weak for the Kim family. Said she'd make me weak. But you married her anyway. I did. And for 5 years, I had something my father couldn't control. Something that was mine. His hand found Yolanda's again, this time settling against her cheek. Then she died. Aneurysm. No warning. Minho found her. He was 4 years old and he walked into her studio and his mother was gone. I'm so sorry. Everyone's sorry. No one can fix it. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. After she died, my father made his move. Claimed I was too grief-stricken to lead. Too distracted by raising Minho alone. He convinced half the board I should step down. Until me. Until you. An American fiancé. Proof I've moved on. Proof I'm stable enough to build a new life. His eyes found hers. Except I don't want another Mi-sun. I want... He stopped himself. Yolanda's breath caught. What do you want? I don't know yet. That's the problem. His hand dropped from her face, and the loss of contact felt like cold water. What I do know is that my father is going to escalate. This, he gestured to his ribs in English, this is just the opening salvo. He wants me to break, to send you away, to prove I'm still the grief-broken man he thinks he can control. And are you? That man? I was, for a long time. He stood, moving to the window. Rain continued its assault on glass, creating the illusion they were underwater. But then you showed up in my pantry wearing a plastic ring my son gave you, and something shifted. Like I remembered there were other ways to survive besides just enduring. Yolanda joined him at the window, close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. Your father is trying to take Minho, isn't he? That's the real threat. Not the company, not the board, your son. Wu Jun went absolutely still. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, yes, Yolanda felt something cold settle in her chest. How long has he been building a case? 3 months. He's been filing reports, calling in child services, creating a paper trail suggesting Minho is at risk, he said in Korean, then switched to English. That I'm too focused on work, too damaged by grief, too isolated. If he succeeds, he doesn't just take the company, he takes my son, uses him as a hostage to control me forever. Then we don't let him succeed. Yolanda turned to face him fully. What do you need from me? Really, I need you to love him, he said in Korean. The words came out raw. Not perform love, not pretend for cameras, actually care about him. Because if my father gets custody, he'll use Minho as a weapon. And that boy has been through enough. I already love him, Yolanda said in Korean, and realized it was true. Somewhere between the plastic ring and the nightmares and the way Minho held her hand like she was the only solid thing in his world, she'd stopped pretending. He's not part of the contract anymore. He's just mine. Something in Wu Jun's expression cracked open. Yolanda. Thunder shattered the moment, followed by lightning that turned the city's strobe light bright. In the flash, she saw him clearly, not the CEO or the grieving widower or the man at war with his father, just someone tired of being strong alone. She reached for his hand. Your father wants you broken? Let's show him what breaking actually looks like. Let's show him what happens when he pushes people together who know how to survive anything. His fingers laced through hers. You're talking about war. I'm talking about winning. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I've been running from Marcus for 2 years. Your father is just a different kind of monster, and I'm done letting monsters win. You're extraordinary, he said quietly. I'm angry, she corrected. But I'll take extraordinary as a compliment. He pulled her closer, his forehead coming to rest against hers. They stood like that, breathing the same air, sharing space in a way that had nothing to do with contracts or performance or anything except two people learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone else help carry the weight. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not running when you saw the blood. For staying when I gave you every reason to leave. For making my son laugh again. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. For making me remember what it feels like to hope. Yolanda's heart did something complicated in her chest. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we actually survive this. Oh, we'll survive, Wu Jun said, and his smile was sharp enough to cut. The question is whether anyone else will. Outside, Seoul drowned in rain. Inside, something shifted between them, the slow burn recognition that this arrangement was becoming something neither of them had planned for. Something dangerous, something real, something worth fighting for. The scandal broke over breakfast like a bomb disguised as news. Yolanda was teaching Minho how to make hotdog Korean sweet pancakes filled with brown sugar and cinnamon that reminded her of beignets from back home when Mrs. Han rushed in with her phone held like evidence of a crime. You need to see this, she said in Korean to Yolanda. The photos were everywhere. Korean tabloids, social media, news sites that should have had better standards. Yolanda in her server's uniform from the Gilded Grill, hair pulled back, smile professional, looking exactly like what she'd been a waitress trying to survive Chicago while Marcus hunted her. The headlines were visceral in their cruelty, even translated. Kim's American fiancé. From poverty to power in one proposal. Gold digger or genuine, the woman trying to buy her way into Korea's richest family. Waitress to wife. How Yolanda Jones seduced one of Asia's most eligible bachelors. The articles were surgical in their precision. They detailed her history, Magnolia Catering's collapse, the fraud charges, the 2 years running. They included interviews with people who claimed to know her, though most of the quotes were clearly fabricated or weaponized fragments torn from context. One photo in particular was being circulated like currency. Yolanda crouched behind the counter at the Gilded Grill, her face carved from exhaustion and fear, looking exactly like someone running from demons too big to fight. Who? Yolanda's voice came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. Who leaked this? I'm trying to determine that, Woo Jun said in Korean. Already on his phone, his expression locked into controlled violence. He switched to English. These photos are from security cameras, the Gilded Grill's system, which means someone with access to my restaurant's security sold them, or was ordered to release them. Madam Kim's voice cut through the chaos. She'd arrived with the particular timing of someone who'd been expecting disaster. This is a coordinated attack, she said in Korean. Multiple outlets releasing simultaneously. Professional PR firms know how to execute these campaigns. Your father, Yolanda said flatly in Korean. My father would never, Madam Kim started. My father absolutely would. Woo Jun's voice was obsidian chips grinding to dust. This is his style. Humiliate before the board meeting. Make Yolanda toxic. Force me to either defend her and look foolish, or abandon her and look weak. Minho tugged on Yolanda's sleeve. Are you sad? The pictures make you look sad, he said in Korean. She crouched down to his level, forcing her expression into something softer. I was sad in those pictures, baby. But I'm not sad now. Know why? Why? Because I'm not alone anymore. I have you, and your daddy. And sometimes having people on your side makes all the difference. He hugged her with the ferocity of someone who understood that words were promises and promises were sacred. Over his head, Yolanda met Woo Jun's eyes and saw something that made her breath catch, not pity, not even anger on her behalf. Recognition, the particular understanding that came from knowing what it felt like to be hunted by people who thought money meant they could rewrite reality. Woo Jun's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and went absolutely still. What? Yolanda asked in Korean. He turned the phone so she could see. A video call request. From a name that made her vision tunnel and her hands shake. Marcus Chen. Yolanda's world narrowed to that name on the screen. 2 years. 2 years of running, hiding, rebuilding herself into someone who could survive him. And now he was calling. Here. In Seoul. Don't answer it, Madam Kim said sharply in Korean. But Woo Jun was already connecting the call. The screen split Marcus on one side, and on the other, a man Yolanda didn't recognize. Sharp features, expensive suit, eyes like a shark assessing prey. Woo Jun, the stranger said in accented English. I see you've made some interesting choices recently. Park Sang-woo. I didn't realize you and Marcus were acquainted, Woo Jun said in Korean. We have mutual interests. Specifically, interests in making sure certain people understand their place, Park Sang-woo said in Korean. Your father sends his regards. He's very disappointed in your recent decisions. Marcus leaned into frame, and seeing his face after 2 years hit Yolanda like a physical blow. He looked older, harder. Success had sharpened his features into something predatory. Yolanda, he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, friendly, hiding poison. You look well, better than I expected given the circumstances. Marcus, her voice came out steadier than her heartbeat. Still framing innocent people for your crimes, or have you found new hobbies? Still delusional, I see. Though I suppose that's what happens when you run from consequences instead of facing them. His smile widened. Did you really think hiding behind a Korean billionaire would save you? That I wouldn't find you? I wasn't hiding. I was building a new life. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you're still the same scared woman who ran from Atlanta with her tail between her legs. Still trying to convince people you're not the fraud we both know you are. Woo Jun's hand found Yolanda's under the table, grounding her. Marcus, I'm going to give you one opportunity to explain what you want before I have you arrested for the 3 counts of fraud and 2 counts of murder you're currently avoiding. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus's smile faltered. I don't know what... David Park, Angela Torres. Both dead within 3 months of each other. Both killed with methods that suggest professional involvement. Both were your accountants who knew too much about your embezzlement schemes. Woo Jun's voice was silk over steel. I have investigators building a case that will put you away for the rest of your life. So let's skip the posturing and get to what you actually want. Park Sang-woo interjected, his expression cold. What we want is simple. Miss Jones returns to the United States, faces her charges, pleads guilty to the fraud we have extensively documented. In exchange, we drop the more serious charges we've been holding in reserve. What charges? Yolanda demanded. Conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, money laundering through your catering company, Tax evasion across 3 states. Park Sang-woo smiled. Charges that carry federal sentences. Charges that would destroy any chance of clearing your name. They'd spent 2 years not just hunting her. They'd been building an entirely new prosecution, fabricated charges so overwhelming she'd have no choice but to plead guilty to the original fraud, just to avoid spending the rest of her life in prison. You're insane, Yolanda breathed. I didn't do any of that. Can you prove it? Because we have documents, testimonies, paper trails that lead directly to accounts in your name. You might be innocent, Yolanda, but we've made very certain you can't prove it. Marcus leaned forward. So here's your choice. Come back to Atlanta. Plead guilty to the original fraud, serve 5 years, or stay in Seoul, marry your billionaire, and watch as we destroy your name so thoroughly even he won't want you. Get out, Woo-jun said quietly in Korean. Excuse me? Get out of my city. Both of you. You have 24 hours before I have every law enforcement agency in 3 countries investigating you simultaneously. His voice dropped to something that made the air pressure change. And Marcus? If you threaten her again, I won't use lawyers. I'll use methods Park Sang-woo taught me. Understand? The call disconnected. The silence that followed was suffocating. Yolanda sat very still, trying to process what had just happened. Marcus was in Seoul, working with Woo-jun's father's enforcer, building fake charges to either force her to confess or destroy her name beyond redemption, and she had no way to fight it. I need to leave, she said quietly. If I stay, I'm painting a target on Minho. On you. Marcus will learn what happens when he threatens my family. Woo-jun's hand tightened on hers. You're not leaving, Yolanda. You're not running. Not anymore. But the charges are fabricated, which means they can be disproven. I have the best lawyers in 3 countries on retainer. We'll dismantle his lies piece by piece. And if we can't... His eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there. He didn't know if they could win, but he was going to fight anyway. Then we lose together, he said. But at least we lose knowing we didn't give him the satisfaction of making you run again. Minho climbed into her lap, his small arms wrapping around her neck. Don't go, he whispered in Korean. Please don't go like Mommy did. And just like that, the decision was made. Yolanda wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. Not until they'd burned down every lie Marcus had built. The 100th floor of Kim Tower was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides, Seoul sprawling below like conquered territory. A conference table carved from a single piece of black walnut, so dark it looked like obsidian. Chairs worth more than most cars, arranged in perfect symmetry, and filling those chairs 23 men in gray suits, their faces carved from the same cold judgment that built empires on other people's backs. Chairman Kim sat at the head, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, holding court like a king about to execute a traitor. Yolanda stood in the antechamber with Woo-jun, wearing armor disguised as clothing. The blood-red suit had been Mrs. Han's idea, silk so fine it looked liquid, tailored so perfectly it could have been painted on. Yolanda's hair was swept back with the severity of someone who'd learned to weaponize presentation. No jewelry except the plastic ring from Minho, still on her finger despite everything. You don't have to do this, Woo-jun said quietly in Korean. I can fight this battle alone. No, you can't. That's the whole point. She adjusted her jacket, feeling the weight of the documents hidden in her briefcase. 3 weeks of investigation since Marcus's video call. 3 weeks of using every contact she'd built in Atlanta. Every skill she'd learned running Magnolia Catering. Every trick Marcus had taught her before he'd used them to destroy her. Your father wants to paint me as the problem? Let's show him what happens when the problem stops apologizing. Yolanda. I learned Korean, she interrupted in Korean. Well enough to tell your father to go fuck himself in his mother tongue. That was the goal, right? His almost smile flickered, dark and proud. You're terrifying. I'm angry. There's a difference. She took his hand, squeezed once. Let's end this. They walked in together. The board fell silent. 23 sets of eyes tracked Yolanda like predators assessing prey. She felt the weight of their judgment foreign, female, black in a room designed for men who looked like money and tradition. She was everything they'd been trained to dismiss. Perfect. Chairman Kim stood, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. Gentlemen, thank you for attending this emergency session, he said in Korean. As you know, we're here to discuss my son's recent choices, specifically his engagement to Miss Yolanda Jones. He gestured to her like she was evidence in a trial, an American waitress with a questionable past and no understanding of our culture or business practices. Father Woo-jun started. Let him finish, Yolanda said quietly in Korean. The room went absolutely still. Chairman Kim's expression flickered surprise, then calculation. Then something darker. You speak Korean. I learn fast when motivated, and your son is very motivating. She moved to stand at the table's center, commanding space like she'd been born to boardrooms instead of Atlanta kitchens. But please continue. I'm curious what other insults you've prepared. This isn't about insults. It's about competence. Chairman Kim pulled out a folder, began distributing copies. These are reports from a private investigator. They detail Miss Jones's criminal history, her debts, her association with known fraudsters. They also include testimony from multiple sources suggesting she seduced my son specifically to access his wealth. Honey trap, one board member muttered in Korean, not realizing she'd understand. Classic. Yolanda let them talk. Let them pass around the papers, reading her history like it was evidence of guilt instead of survival. She waited until Chairman Kim sat down, satisfied he'd destroyed her. Then she opened her briefcase. You're right about one thing, she said in Korean that made several board members shift uncomfortably. I am motivated by money. Not Woo Jun's money. Yours. She pulled out the first document, projected it on the screen behind her. Bank transfers appeared. Offshore accounts. A web of financial transactions so complex it took the board a moment to understand what they were seeing. This, Yolanda continued in Korean, is $30 million in embezzled funds, taken from Kim Group subsidiaries over the past 6 years. Laundered through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Luxembourg, filtered back into personal accounts belonging to many of you. The room erupted. This is absurd, someone shouted in Korean. Where did you get? Another demanded. You can't prove, a third protested. I can. Yolanda's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Because I spent 3 years as a business owner learning how to track money, and when my former partner tried to destroy me, I learned to track it better. So when Woo Jun asked me to investigate his father's finances, I found something interesting. She pulled up another document. Chairman Kim has been systematically looting the company, but he couldn't do it alone. He needed board members willing to look the other way. So he paid you, all of you, $30 million in bribes disguised as consulting fees. On screen, payment records. Consulting fees that didn't match any actual consulting work. Wire transfers to personal accounts. Email chains discussing projects that never existed. Chairman Kim has been systematically looting the company, she said in Korean. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed board members willing to look the other way. So he paid you. She switched to English. All of you, $30 million in bribes disguised as consulting fees. The revelation hung in the air like poison gas. Board members looked at each other, at Chairman Kim, at the evidence projected behind Yolanda that made denial impossible. This is fabricated, Chairman Kim started. Is it? Because I have bank statements, wire transfers, emails discussing consulting projects that never existed, shell company registrations traced to addresses you all own. Yolanda moved closer to him. You tried to paint me as a criminal, but I'm not the one stealing from shareholders. I'm not the one bribing board members. I'm not the one trying to remove your son so you can loot his company blind. Father, Woo Jun's voice was obsidian chips grinding to dust. Is she lying? Chairman Kim's expression was carved from stone. This proves nothing. Fabricated documents are sitting in the prosecutor's office right now, Yolanda interrupted in Korean. Along with testimony from 3 whistleblowers, including Park Sang-woo, your enforcer, who decided immunity was better than loyalty once he saw the evidence. She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. You taught me something valuable, Chairman. You showed me that powerful men think they're untouchable. And you're wrong. The door opened. Police entered, not regular police, but the kind that investigated white-collar crime with the same intensity others hunted murderers. Chairman Kim, the lead detective said in Korean, we have a warrant for your arrest. Embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud. You'll need to come with us. The room descended into chaos. Board members shouting, lawyers being called, Chairman Kim standing frozen, finally understanding he'd miscalculated. But in the chaos, no one noticed the text that appeared on Woo Jun's phone. No one except him. His face went white. Minho. The words came out strangled in English. They have Minho. Yolanda's world stopped. What? From the building's childcare facility. Someone bypassed security and he was already moving toward the door, Yolanda right behind him. The text had been simple. Your son is payment for what you took from me. The roof. Come alone or he falls. Park Sang-woo. Park Sang-woo hadn't actually flipped. He'd been playing both sides, waiting to see who'd win. And now that Chairman Kim was arrested, he'd made his move not for loyalty, but for leverage, for escape, a hostage to get him out of the country before the prosecutors connected all the dots. Yolanda was running before her conscious mind caught up to her body. The roof was 10 floors up, accessible by private elevator or emergency stairs. The elevator would be faster but more obvious. Stairs gave them the element of surprise. Stairs, she gasped. Faster. They hit the emergency stairwell like a tectonic collision, Yolanda in front because she was faster. Woo Jun behind her barking orders into his phone in Korean so rapid she couldn't follow. 10 floors. 200 steps. Her lungs burned in the expensive heels. She kicked them off mid-stride, the silk stockings giving her purchase on concrete as she climbed. Behind her, Woo Jun's voice. All security to the roof. But don't approach. He has Min-ho. If he gets spooked. They burst through the roof access door into Seoul sunlight so bright it hurt. The cityscape sprawled in all directions, glass towers and ancient temples, wealth and history colliding in the space between earth and sky. Park Sang-woo stood at the edge of the roof, one arm wrapped around Min-ho's chest. The boy's face was white with terror, but his body was rigid with the particular stillness prey animals learned when captured. Behind them, a helicopter waited, rotors already spinning. Stop there, Park Sang-woo said in Korean. Come any closer and I drop him. Let my son go. Woo Jun's voice was controlled death in Korean. This is between us. Leave my son out of it. But that's the point, isn't it? Park Sang-woo's smile was terrible. Your son is leverage. The only leverage that actually works on you. Sign over the company, or I walk out of here with him. You won't get 10 feet. Woo Jun said in Korean. Won't I? Your security is currently dealing with the arrest of half your board. The elevators are on lockdown. The police are occupied. And I have a helicopter on the roof with a pilot who doesn't ask questions. He moved toward the aircraft. So you have a choice, Woo Jun. Your empire or your son. Min-ho's eyes found Yolanda's. In them, she saw terror, but also trust. The absolute belief that she would do something, that she wouldn't let the bad guys win. Something cold and ancient moved through Yolanda's chest. She thought about Marcus's video call, about the fabricated charges, about the casual way powerful men used other people as game pieces. And she realized something. Park Sang-woo was working for Marcus. This entire thing, Chairman Kim's arrest, the timing, everything had been orchestrated to create exactly this chaos. Marcus sent you, Yolanda said quietly. This was his plan all along, not just to frame me, to destroy everything Woo Jun built. Very good. Park Sang-woo's smile widened. Marcus is quite thorough. You should know you trained him, after all. All those years building Magnolia Catering, teaching him how to see vulnerabilities, how to exploit leverage. You made him what he is. The words were designed to break her, to make her believe this was her fault. Instead, they made her remember. Atlanta, the streets she'd learned before culinary school, the survival skills she'd picked up from cousins who knew how to fight because they'd never had the luxury of safety, the version of herself that knew sometimes you had to get blood under your fingernails if you wanted to stay alive. Yolanda moved. Not toward Park Sang-woo, he'd expect that. Toward the heavy metal toolbox left by maintenance workers near the roof access. Her hand closed around a wrench. She threw, not at Park Sang-woo. At the helicopter's tail rotor, the impact was spectacular. Metal on metal, sparks flying, the rotor damaged enough that the pilot immediately killed the engine. No escape by air now. Park Sang-woo's attention flickered just a second. Just enough. Min-ho did exactly what Yolanda had taught him during their 3 months together. He went limp, became dead weight, making himself impossible to hold with one arm. Then his teeth found flesh. Park Sang-woo's grip loosened in pain and surprise. Yolanda was already there. She grabbed Min-ho, yanked him away with force that would leave bruises but kept him alive. She shoved him toward Woo Jun. Take him. Then she turned back to Park Sang-woo, and everything she'd learned surviving Atlanta before she'd learned to cook came flooding back. She didn't fight fair, didn't fight clean. She fought like someone who understood that rules were for people with options, and she was fresh out. Her knee found his groin, her elbow found his throat. When he doubled over, she grabbed his head and brought it down to meet her rising knee. Cartilage broke, blood sprayed. He went down hard, and she followed him down, her hands finding pressure points that made him scream. Security swarmed seconds later, too late to help, just in time to witness. Woo Jun had Min-ho wrapped in his arms, the boy crying but whole. Mrs. Han appeared from nowhere with a blanket. Police took Park Sang-woo into custody, his face a ruin, his leverage gone. And Yolanda stood there, breathing hard, her expensive suit torn, her hands bloody, her stockinged feet cut from running up concrete stairs, her expression carved from something between rage and relief. You told me I was dangerous like a mirror, she said to Woo Jun. You were wrong. I'm dangerous like a lioness, and you just threatened my cub. The look on his face was something she couldn't name. Not gratitude, not even respect. Something deeper. Something that made the air between them vibrate with recognition and inevitability. He crossed to her, still holding Minho. The boy reached out, and Yolanda took him, feeling his small body shake with adrenaline and fear and relief. You saved him, Woo Jun said quietly. Of course I did. He's mine. The words came out naturally, like breathing. Not because of a contract, not because of a deal. Just mine. Minho's arms tightened around her neck. I love you, Mommy, he whispered in Korean. I love you too, baby. So much. Woo Jun's hand found the back of her neck, pulling her forehead to his. The contract is void. You know that, right? This stopped being fake the moment you chose to stay. I know. So what now? Yolanda pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Now we win. Actually win. Not just survive. We burn down everyone who tried to hurt us, and we build something better from the ashes. Together? Together. Police informed them that Marcus had been arrested at Incheon Airport trying to flee. When confronted with Park Sang-woo's confession and the evidence from Chairman Kim's arrest, he'd broken completely admitted to the murders of David Park and Angela Torres, to the embezzlement, to the conspiracy, to using Park Sang-woo to kidnap Minho. Everything. All of it. In exchange for a reduced sentence that would still see him behind bars for most of his natural life. It was over. Really over. But as Woo Jun looked at Yolanda, holding his son on a Seoul rooftop with blood on her hands and fire in her eyes, he understood that something else was just beginning. You're absolutely right. Let me revise Chapter 9. 6 months later. Seoul had learned to say her name correctly. Yolanda Jones, she'd kept her name, refused to disappear into his, stood in the center of what used to be an abandoned warehouse in Itaewon, and was now the most anticipated restaurant opening in Seoul's history, the Lion's Den, her kingdom. Built from her vision, her recipes, her refusal to let anyone tell her she didn't belong, the space was everything she'd dreamed: exposed brick painted in deep charcoal, Edison bulbs casting shadows like secrets, an open kitchen where diners could watch her work. The menu was fusion in ways that made traditional chefs nervous. Korean banchan beside Louisiana hot sauce, galbi tacos, kimchi gumbo, sweet potato tempura with comeback sauce, food that refused to choose sides. The opening was invitation only. Critics, celebrities, board members desperate to prove they'd always believed in Woo Jun, politicians who needed Kim money, and in the back, near the loading dock, a man in stained work clothes unloading crates, Marcus Chen, 15 years, eligible for parole in 8 with good behavior. Part of his restitution was working off the debt he owed to his victims. Yolanda had requested he be assigned to her restaurant. Some called it cruel. She called it poetry. She walked to the loading dock, heels clicking on concrete. Marcus looked up, and for a moment, she saw him remember who she used to be, the woman he'd destroyed, the partner he'd betrayed. The tomatoes go in the walk-in cooler, she said calmly in Korean, then switched to English. Not dry storage. If you can't remember basic kitchen protocol, I'll have to call your supervisor, Yolanda. Chef Jones, she corrected. Or just chef. We're not friends, Marcus. We're employer and court-appointed labor. Know the difference. He stared at her, this woman in designer clothes, successful restaurant, everything she'd built after he'd tried to destroy her. She saw the moment he understood that she'd won. Completely. Irrevocably. You told me I'd never be more than a cook, she said quietly, mixing Korean and English, that I didn't have what it took to build something real. You were wrong. And now you're in my kitchen, handling my ingredients, working for my empire. She turned to go, then paused. Don't drop the tomatoes, Marcus. They're imported from Italy. They cost more than your dignity. Inside, the restaurant was filling. Yolanda moved through the space, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, feeling the weight of victory settle into her bones. Minho ran up to her, wearing a miniature chef's outfit Mrs. Han had made. Mommy, look. I'm a chef like you, he said in Korean. She scooped him up, feeling his weight, his warmth, his absolute certainty that she would always be there. You look very professional. Want to help me with dessert later? Yes. He wiggled down, ran back to show Woo Jun his outfit. Woo Jun stood near the kitchen, watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. 6 months of learning to be a family. 6 months of therapy for Minho, who'd finally stopped having nightmares. 6 months of board meetings where Yolanda sat beside Woo Jun, not as decoration but as counsel. 6 months of something that had started as survival and become something neither of them could name because the words felt too small. He crossed to her, and in his hand was a small box. Woo-jun, it's not what you think. Well, it is, but it's also not. He opened it. Inside, the plastic carnation ring from Minho, but transformed. The cheap vending machine toy had been preserved in resin, then set in white gold, surrounded by pigeon blood rubies so dark they looked like frozen blood. Minho asked if the fake wedding could be real. Woo-jun said quietly, mixing Korean and English. And I realized I didn't know how to answer him, because nothing about us has ever been fake. Not from the moment you put on his ring and agreed to marry a 6-year-old to escape sharks. Yolanda's vision blurred. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. We've been through too much too fast, and I want to court you properly. Take you to dinner, learn what you like, build something that's ours, not born from crisis. He slid the ring onto her finger beside the original plastic one she still wore. But I am asking if you'll stay. Really stay. Not because of a contract or Minho or any reason except that you want to, because you choose us. I already chose you, she said. Months ago. Maybe from the beginning. Then let's choose each other every day. Intentionally. Not because we have to, but because we want to. She looked at him, this man who'd offered her protection and given her partnership, who'd learned to laugh again because his son had chosen her, who'd stood beside her through boardroom wars and rooftop kidnappings and the slow, terrifying work of learning to trust again, and she realized something that made her chest tight with a feeling she'd almost forgotten how to name. She didn't want to marry him, not because she didn't love him, but because she'd spent 2 years running from Marcus, 3 months in a fake engagement, 6 months building something real, and what she'd learned was this. She didn't need to be anyone's wife to be whole. Not even his. I don't want to marry you, she said quietly. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, understanding. I see. Listen. She took his hands. I love you, and I love Minho, and I love what we've built. But I've fought too hard to prove that a marriage certificate doesn't define my worth. She continued in English because some things were easier in her mother tongue. I don't want to be Mrs. Kim. I want to be Yolanda Jones, who loves you, who helps you raise Minho, who builds her empire next to yours. I want partnership without paperwork, family without formality, love without needing the law to make it legitimate. So, what? His voice was carefully controlled. We just don't marry? We build something better. We prove that family is what we choose to build, not what we sign. We show Minho that commitment isn't about rings and ceremonies, it's about showing up, every single day. Choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. She pulled the new ruby ring from her finger, held it between them. This is beautiful, and I want to keep it, not as an engagement ring. As a reminder that Minho saw something in me before anyone else did. That sometimes the most important promises are the ones we make to children with plastic rings. She put it back on. I'll wear both. The plastic and the precious. Because that's what we are. Something that started cheap and got valuable. Not because we got married, because we chose to fight together. Woo-jun stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, impossibly, he started to laugh. Not the dark amusement she was used to. Real laughter. The kind that came from relief and surprise and recognition. You're extraordinary, he said. I'm honest, she corrected. And honestly, I don't need to be your wife to be your partner. I don't need your last name to be Minho's mother. I just need this. Us. What we've already built. He pulled her close, his forehead against hers. What if someday you change your mind? Then we'll talk about it. But right now, this is enough. This is everything. Minho ran over, oblivious to the magnitude of what had just shifted. Are we ready to make dessert? He asked in Korean. Yes, Yolanda said, taking his hand. Let's go. As they walked toward the kitchen together, the three of them, choosing each other without ceremony, without paperwork, without anything except intention and love, Yolanda felt something settle into her bones that she'd never quite felt before. Peace. Not the peace of having won. The peace of knowing she didn't have to keep fighting to prove her worth. She was enough, exactly as she was. Restaurant owner, partner, mother in every way that mattered. Not his wife, just herself. And that was the greatest victory of all. The Lion's Den had expanded. 2 more locations. A cookbook. A television deal Yolanda had negotiated on her terms. And through it all, she and Woo-jun remained exactly what they'd always been. Partners. Minho was 9 now, fluent in Korean and English, and the particular language of people who understood that family wasn't about blood or law, it was about choice. People still asked when they were getting married. Yolanda always smiled and said the same thing. Why fix something that isn't broken? Marcus served his sentence. Chairman Kim died in prison. Park Sang-woo testified against everyone he'd ever worked for and disappeared into witness protection. And Yolanda? Yolanda learned that sometimes the most radical thing you could do was refuse to follow a script. To love someone without needing permission from the state or a church or anyone except the people involved. She wore both rings every day, plastic and precious together. A reminder that value wasn't about money or status or titles. It was about a 6-year-old boy who'd seen someone hiding and offered them the sky. The bravest love isn't the love that gets a ring. It's the love that shows up every morning and chooses to stay without needing a contract to make it real. Family isn't about last names or legal documents. It's about the people who fight for you, build with you, and love you exactly as you are, no modifications required. If this story reminded you that you don't need anyone's permission to build the life you want, not from institutions, not from tradition, not from anyone except yourself and the people you love, share it. Tell me in the comments. What script are you refusing to follow? What's the life you're building on your own terms? And remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. Everything else is just choosing who gets to share in your extraordinary. Until next time, stay ruthless, stay brave, and never stop choosing yourself first. Then choose the people who choose you back. On your terms, always on your terms.